Hi, Dara. It's Margie with Basmati. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm perfect. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Today we're talking with Dara. She's with Albuquerque Herbalism.com, and she's going to share a little bit about herbalism and her story and how she got on this path. We're going to start there. So let's
All right.
go.
Well, yes. Thanks for having me. I started my herbalism path in kind of maybe a unusual way. I came to my love of nature a little bit later in life when I was a young adult, going on road trips and exploring the American West. I realized I loved forests and rivers and canyons and the plants that grew in them, and then I took that naturally occurring passion and I went to school and received professional training at the master's level to become a landscape geographer. And that's how I started. And then I became an herbalist on top of that, receiving formal herbalism training after getting my training as a geographer. So that shaped ultimately my whole approach to herbalism by not just looking at plants as individuals, but rather looking at plants as part of a system, a living system that makes up an entire landscape. And so that is what makes up my approach to herbalism and perhaps gives it a little bit of uniqueness, as each herbalist has their own approach. Mine is a systems and a landscape approach, and looking at how plants play their part in the world in which they live, and using that knowledge to understand how they work as medicines inside of us.
That's awesome, and how beautiful. I'm going to say, we chatted about this earlier, you're really going to love that book, Braiding Sweetgrass. You're going to love it. That's just a little side note, but it's beautiful. And so on that journey, I know that you've written quite a few articles and I think helped with some books, correct? You know, and your own.
Yes, I've written quite a few articles, that's for sure, and I do like to write, so they will continue coming.
So I encourage anyone, on her website, please check them out. They're really beautiful to read and a ton of information. And so let's share a little bit about herbal health and vitality.
All right. What would you like to know?
Everything that you've got. I know we don't have a lot of time for that, but let's do it. Tell me what herbal health is, just in case someone doesn't know who's listening.
Well, I think however many herbalists you ask this question to would probably each have their own different answer. So I can just tell you how I view that and what my journey has taught me about that. For me, herbal health and vitality is something that essentially comes from within and from without. And for me, the more I learn about myself as a wild human being in the world, the more that line is blurred. Within and without are essentially the same to me now. And that is because I learned to make relationships with plants, relationships that transcend me as an individual. And through my relationship with plants, I have come to understand that all of our well-being comes from within us and through our connection that transcends ourself and our own species, when we realize that we are wild and we are part of everything that is wild and we are inseparable from that, we essentially transcend ourselves and become part of every living thing and every living system throughout time and space, out into the cosmos and beyond. And when we derive our energy from that source of all life and all energy, and all of our relationships and all of our actions emanate from that insight, then our well-being is limitless, without bounds. And for me, that is what herbal health is. And plants, of course, have been my conduit to that, though I believe that people can come to that same realization in an infinite number of means.
Yes. That's really beautifully said. And our connection, not only with earth, herbs, plants, everything, is it is truly us and in us. Outside of us, there's no space or limiting factors when we live our life that way, right?
Yes.
Right. It's so and it's so healing inside, and I think about just if someone's even not by the forest or a flowing river, even just sitting by a tree in a park can be so healing for them, right? And
yes, or even remembering a moment of connection that happened at another time can take you back to that same place of wellness.
Mm-hmm. I was hiking in the mountains in Montana last week, and there were several children around, and it was so cute watching them. They're taking their shoes off, and they're just putting their feet in the mud and letting the river flow through them, and you could just watch them shift in everything, their whole being, much more grounded and rooted, but yet still expansive, and in that, and being a part of that, allowed all of us to share in that space. So you're right, and just a remembering of that. Even me talking about it right now, I'm picturing one of the little girls and her toes just meshing through, and she's grabbing these plants, right? And we were picking huckleberries actually. So she's like eating huckleberries and her feet are in the ground, and she's just glowing with joy from being in nature. And as I talk about it, I'm connected to that energy of that experience, and my whole body is feeling that, So it's just such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful earth we're on. So let's get into ecological herbalism.
All right. So ecological herbalism is just sort of a name I've given to an approach to herbalism that makes sense to me. Not only personally, but also in the interest of making herbalism sustainable, which it isn't inherently. We have to make it that way. For me, ecological herbalism means understanding not just plants, but again, understanding how plants interact with their environment and all of the connections that are taking place, all of the interactions that are taking place, and the dynamic flow of energy and the dynamic interaction of all of those personalities. And I mean not just plants, but animals, rivers, rocks, air, rain, everything. All of those things have a vital life force that interact with one another. And when we understand all of those complex dynamics, or as much of that as we're able to understand, we can gain new insights about plants. Not only does it help us to do that, which I'll talk more about in a second, but it also helps us to root more deeply where we are. And the deeper our taproot grows, the deeper our lateral roots spread, the more balanced we become in our own lives. And again, back to that idea of transcending ourselves to connect with other kinds of life that we are ultimately inseparable from. So understanding these connections of plants and their interactions in the landscape helps us to understand also, in a more practical manner, how they work as medicines. For example, when we take a look at something like Yerba, which is a plant that I always like to talk about, I learned so much about how that plant works as a medicine by simply understanding its ecological interactions and the role that it plays in its own living system where it occurs naturally. So Yerba is a riparian wetlands plant. So you can imagine the kinds of environments that it grows in. Here in the Middle Rio Grande Valley where I live, these riparian environments are very altered. Riparian environments around the world are the most altered environments anywhere because that's where humans settle and build their civilizations along. Here, we have a situation where Yerba evolved over a very, very long period of time. It's a paleo herb. It's believed to be one of the first flowering herbs that have existed on Earth. It evolved before there were even bees as pollinators. So in this case, Yerba mansa has this very ancient lineage of wisdom going back innumerable generations. And in its environment, it lives in a place that was, for millions of years before dams and jetty jacks and cities and farms, its environment was a highly altering environment where it would oscillate between high surges of raging river floods and then times of lower flows and less water. And so it was adapted to this highly changing environment, and it was typically very boggy, very wet, and for most of the time rather slow moving. And Yerba mansa developed roots that would penetrate through this intractable, thick mud and aerate the soil. The volatile oils in its roots would change the soil chemistry in favor of growing other native plants. So Yerba mansa actually facilitates the growth of other plants where it grows. And so it's a facilitator of health and invigorating a slow-moving microbial-filled environment. And when we understand that ecological role that this plant plays in the bosque, it's easy to understand its medicine. When our bodies are wet, boggy, stagnant, slow-moving kinds of environments, Yerba mansa penetrates through that, invigorating the flow of energy and fluids in the body, revitalizing the entire system, using its chemicals to change microbial balances in our favor and to help us in very, very many ways. And so this is an example of how understanding ecology teaches us as herbalists, and this is a way of learning directly from the plants themselves that seems to make sense both to me in my heart and my emotional realm, but also makes perfect sense in my logical, intellectual mind as well. It's a way of harmonizing all the parts of ourselves and all of our different kinds of ways of understanding the world and bringing it all together in harmony. And again, ecological approach to herbalism, understanding plants as part of the system and how they interact and change that system helps us to understand them as herbalists.
Them and ourselves, right? So as you talk about that, I'm thinking about like when we're all sluggish and the things that we do to transform that, right? And ways we can do that. And plants definitely are one of our greatest teachers, I believe. So so as we talk about that, what I want to go is into the Herbal Mansa project and what that, I know that you're very passionate about that and what that is and how we can get involved.
Yes, I'd love to talk about that. The Yerba Mansa project is now in its third field season, and we are about ready to launch our brand new website at yerbamansaproject.org, and we have essentially been through all volunteer service. Our entire staff and all of our field crews are all volunteer members, and we have been developing a multifaceted program that is designed to bring people into the Rio Grande Bosque, which is our riparian floodplain environment, to help people become more connected with this natural area that runs right through the middle of our city of Albuquerque, and to help them fall in love with it and to understand it and to re-become a part of this river that sustains all of us, and to re-acknowledge that. And we've been doing it through a couple of different ways. Firstly, we've been doing active riparian restoration work with our volunteer crew. Our volunteer crew consists of anyone and everyone from our area who wants to join. We've got little toddlers and babies in slings all the way up to retired folks who just want to help restore our bosque, and everyone in between. So it's an all-inclusive community endeavor to help reestablish a healthy balance of native plants in this area where we have a large surge of non-native invasive species becoming more and more dominant all the time, and in some cases forming monoscapes where biodiversity is severely diminished and native plants are becoming extirpated from local areas. So our view is through our restoration work to help the bosque transition into a healthy 21st century riparian plant community where native plants are thriving alongside non-native plants, and to help this plant community as a whole to thrive in the coming decades and centuries that are expected to be hotter and drier and more hostile to the native plants that have evolved here over millions of years. In addition to the restoration work, which involves removing invasive species and replanting natives, we are also doing a lot of educational outreach. We do free programs throughout the year that are geared towards the adult community, but everyone is welcome to attend those. We talk about changing landscapes, plant ecology, edible medicinal plants, and so on. We also do a program that is geared towards students and educators, offering free programs for schools, scout troops, any kind of youth group, homeschool groups, whoever wants to participate. We offer free educational programs on plant identification and the natural history of our bosque. And we also offer the opportunity for these groups to engage in the restoration work. We feel that these kinds of programs not only help bring people back into connection with what they've lost in terms of their connection to the natural world, but we're also trying to create a community that is revitalized and interested in where they live and willing to do the active work that it takes to look after our public lands in this modern era where there are so many changes taking place and it's so difficult for government agencies to do the work that they do with not enough funding and not enough staff. So we're contributing in many ways to the restoration of the bosque and the restoration of our community's connection to the natural world.
Okay, so if someone is not in your area and they want to get involved, how can they do that? And I want to add to that just briefly that when we align our energy to something, even if we're not there, whether it be a donation, whatever that is, when we're not there, we're still a part of an energetic structure, and our system is growing in consciousness with that, even if we're not on the roots on the ground with it, with the project. So
absolutely. Our project exists because of a tremendous outpouring of community support. Local community is driving it, but we have an extended community of support radiating out in all directions, far and wide. People who have encouraged us, who have helped us to spread the word, who have donated money to our project, who subscribe to our newsletter and simply are becoming more informed about ecological issues, which are highlighted in the middle Rio Grande Valley where climate change is unfolding right before our eyes. And so people can become involved in the Yerba Monster Project no matter where they live. As I said before, our project is entirely run on donations and volunteer service, and we've had a tremendous outpouring of support which has enabled our project not only to survive but thrive and grow over the years. We have expanded significantly through local and extended community support. So if you like our project and want to become involved, I would encourage people to subscribe to our newsletter and to consider a donation to help fund all of our free educational programs and our restoration service.
So can I ask you one quick question, which I think what a beautiful project, and I want to honor and thank you for not only your time but your love in this project, because it will spread not to just your community, and I trust that. So what if the educational, I'm going to ask a little bit about that. So do you currently have materials that we could send, that you could send to other schools if they were interested? Or is that something that might be a possibility in the future?
Our educational coordinator right now is in the process of developing educational packets that are geared towards the school groups that come and participate in our project, but they will be freely available to anyone who wishes to learn about this. So they are in development right now.
Oh, perfect. I'm so excited. That's lovely. That's lovely. That's super exciting. So before we close, because I know we're going to chat again about other things, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I just always like to end with a word of inspiration for anyone out there who would like to become more deeply connected. That opportunity is available for you to become very deeply rooted wherever you live, and you don't even have to go to the mountains, to the river, or anywhere to do it. You can find that connection any place, anytime. It's always available, and it's never lost. Just by looking at a blade of grass in the park, or by taking a bite of a raspberry or a sip of apple juice, you can connect with the source of all life through any opportunity in any moment to connect. It's always there. Taking one raspberry into your mouth, you are essentially connecting with all the raspberries that have ever existed throughout time and space. Those raspberry seeds hold the infinity, the eternity of all raspberries in each one of those seeds. You are interbeing with not only that raspberry, but with the rain that fell from the sky, the nutrients in the soil, the clouds that formed above, the sunshine that plant photosynthesized to make that fruit, and of course, all the cosmic aspects that have ever existed that produced that sun energy, and so on and so on. So that connection with eternity and all life is always available in any ordinary moment.
Beautifully said. So let's share how everyone can reach you. I know currently right now, albuquerqueherbalism.com.
Yes, and very soon, the yerbamantraproject.org website will be going live, and you can always email me at dara@albuquerqueherbalism.com.
Oh, Dara, it's been a true honor and gift to have you on the show and share this time with you. And again, deep gratitude and for all you do. Looking forward to some of the projects ahead.
Thank you so very much, Margie, for having me.
Okay, Dara, have a beautiful day.
You as well.
Bye-bye.